The irony wasn't lost on me, lying there on the shoulder of Interstate 90 with my left leg bent at an angle that would make a yoga instructor weep. My phone had somehow survived the crash better than I had. Screen cracked but functional, displaying Rachel's contact info like a cruel joke. I dialed her number while the paramedic, a kid who looked like he'd started shaving last week, tried to convince me I needed a stretcher. "Just let me comb my wife," I muttered, blood trickling from a cut above my eyebrow. The phone rang 4 times. Of course it did. Rachel Harmon, hospital administrator, keeper of my emergency contact information, couldn't be bothered to answer on the first ring when her husband of 15 years was decorating the asphalt with his DNA. "Nick, what's wrong?" Her voice carried that familiar note of irritation, like I'd interrupted something important, which apparently I had. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, watching the young paramedic shake his head at my stubbornness. "So, funny story. Remember how you always said my driving would be the death of me? Well, some jackass in a semi just tried to prove you right. I'm currently having a very intimate conversation with the highway." Silence, then. "Are you hurt?" "Well, I'm not calling to discuss the weather. Yeah, I'm hurt. They want to take me to Cleveland General. Can you meet me there?" Another paused. I could hear restaurant chatter in the background, the clink of glasses, someone laughing. "Nick, I'm having lunch with Jacob. Can't you just take an Uber?" I stared at the phone. The paramedic was staring at me too, probably wondering if the head trauma was worse than initially diagnosed. "An Uber?" I repeated slowly. "To the emergency room, where they'll want to talk to my next of kin about whether I need surgery." "Look, I'll try to get there when I can, okay? Just handle it for now." The line went dead. The paramedic cleared his throat. "Sir, we really need to get you loaded up. That leg needs attention." I let him help me under the stretcher, my mind processing what had just happened. 15 years of marriage, and my wife had just told me to Uber my way to the hospital while she had lunch with Jacob Mendoza, the ER doctor who drove a Porsche and looked like he'd stepped out of a medical drama casting call. "Hey," I called to the state trooper who was taking photos of my crumpled Honda. "Officer Martinez, right?" He nodded. "Yeah. You need something?" "Could you do me a favor? My wife's at Romano's downtown having lunch. Table probably has a view, knowing her taste. Dark hair, probably wearing something expensive. Sitting with a guy who looks like he practices his concerned doctor face in the mirror. Could you let her know which hospital they're taking me to? She seemed a little confused about the logistics." Officer Martinez looked at me like I was nuts, but he nodded. "Sure thing, Romanos," you said. "Tell her Nick Harmon says, thanks for the Uber suggestion, but the ambulance has better insurance coverage." As they loaded me into the ambulance, I couldn't help but laugh. It hurt my ribs, but I laughed anyway. After all, what else do you do when you realize your wife values her lunch date more than your pulse? The paramedic, his name tag read Stevens, was checking my vitals. "Blood pressure is a little high, but that's normal for trauma. Try to stay calm." "Oh, I'm calm," I said, staring at the ambulance ceiling. "I'm having what you might call a moment of clarity." Ever have one of those, Stevens? Can't say I have, sir. They're enlightening. Really puts things in perspective. 20 minutes later, as they wheeled me into Cleveland General's emergency department, I caught sight of Officer Martinez walking through the main entrance. He had that purposeful stride cops get when they're about to deliver news nobody wants to hear. I hoped Jacob was enjoying his lunch. The ER was typical controlled chaos. Nurses moving with practiced efficiency, doctors barking orders, the steady beep of monitors creating a medical symphony. They parked me in Bay 7, where a tired-looking resident named Dr. Patel started poking and prodding my leg. "Looks like a clean break," she said, studying the x-rays. "We'll need to set it, but you should heal up fine. Lucky you weren't going faster." "Yeah, I'm just overflowing with luck today." She gave me a curious look, but didn't comment. Doctors see all kinds in the ER. A bitter husband with a broken leg. Probably didn't even register on her weirdo meter. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Officer said, "You're a general in surgery meeting. We'll try to stop by later." Surgery meeting? Right. I've been married to a hospital administrator long enough to know that surgery meetings happen in conference rooms, not Italian restaurants with white tablecloths and wine lists. I texted back, "No rush. Apparently, I can handle it." Dr. Patel was explaining the procedure when I heard familiar voices in the hallway. Rachel's laugh, followed by a deeper male chuckle. They were walking past my bay, probably heading to Jacob's office or wherever it was they conducted their, quote, meetings, end. Told the cop I was in a surgery meeting. Rachel was saying, like I'm supposed to drop everything because Nick can't drive in the rain. Guy needs to learn some independence, came Jacob's voice. You're not his mother. They passed by without looking in. Rachel, my wife of 15 years, walked right past the bay where I was lying with a broken leg, too busy laughing with Doctor. Perfect to notice the curtain wasn't fully closed. Dr. Patel noticed my expression. Everything okay? Just peachy, I said. Hey, Doc, when you set this leg, maybe you could make it a little stronger than before. I have a feeling I'm going to need it, she smiled. Probably thinking I was talking about physical therapy. I wasn't. I was thinking about the long road ahead and how sometimes a man needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, even if one of them comes with a few extra screws. 3 weeks later, I was hobbling around on crutches, packing my stuff into boxes that seemed too small for 15 years of marriage. Rachel had been efficient about the whole thing. Papers served, lawyers contacted, custody arrangements discussed. She'd moved fast, like she'd been planning this for months. Which, considering what I'd learned since my highway revelation, she probably had. Dad, this is bullshit, Jamie said, taping up a box of my books. At 14, my son had developed a vocabulary that would make a sailor proud, and an attitude that suggested he'd inherited my talent for sarcasm. Mom can't just kick you out. Technically, she's not kicking me out, I explained, wrapping my tools in newspaper. She's creating space for personal growth and healing. Her lawyer's words, not mine. That's the same thing, just with more syllables. The kid had a point. I was moving into the apartment above my restoration shop, a drafty space that smelled like motor oil and old wood. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Plus, the rent was right. I owned the building. Rachel appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Hospital administration paid well, and she'd always known how to spend it. How's the packing going? Like a dream, I said. Nothing says amicable separation like boxing up your life while your wife watches from the doorway. Nick, don't be dramatic. This is better for everyone. Jaime snorted. Better for you and Doctor. Douche, maybe. Jamie, Rachel's voice went sharp. Jacob is a good man, and he's been very patient with this whole situation. Patient? I looked up from my box of socket wrenches. That's an interesting word choice. How long has he been practicing patience exactly? Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly. We're not doing this now. No, I guess we're not. We should have done it months ago, back when honesty was still an option. My phone buzzed, a text from my buddy Ray, who owned Murphy's Tavern downtown. Heard about the split. First beer's on me whenever you're ready. Ray Martinez, not related to Officer Martinez, just one of those cosmic coincidences. Had been my friend since high school. He'd also been through a messy divorce 3 years ago, so he understood the particular kind of hell I was navigating. I'm going to grab some more boxes from the garage, I told Jaime. Keep packing the books. The garage was my sanctuary, where I restored classic cars and pretended the world made sense. My current project, a 1967 Mustang Fastback, sat under a tarp like a sleeping beast. I've been working on her for 2 years, and she was almost ready to roar again. I was digging through storage shelves when I heard voices from the kitchen window above. Rachel and her friend Tessa having one of their coffee chats that always seemed to involve dissecting someone's life. "Told you this would happen eventually," Tessa was saying. "Nick's a good guy, but he's not exactly ambitious. Jacob's going places." "I know," Rachel replied. "I just feel bad about the timing, the accidents and everything." "Please, he had a broken leg, not brain surgery. You can't put your life on hold because your husband can't handle highway driving." I froze, a box of carburetor parts in my hands. "Jacob thinks we should move to Columbus." Rachel continued. "He's got an offer at Ohio State's medical center, department head position." "What about Jamie?" "He can visit Nick on weekends. It might be good for him to get away from all this negativity." I set the box down carefully, afraid I might throw it through the window. They were planning to take my son 3 hours away so Rachel could play house with Doctor. Perfect. The surgery meeting suddenly made a lot more sense. I climbed the stairs back to the house where Jaime was still packing books and muttering creative insults about his mother's boyfriend. "Hey, kiddo," I said. "How do you feel about Columbus?" He looked up, confused. "The city. I don't know why, just wondering. You ever think about living somewhere else?" "Not really. All my friends are here." "My school, your shop." He paused, studying my face. "Dad, what's going on?" Before I could answer, Rachel walked back in, Tessa trailing behind her like a perfectly coiffed shadow. "Oh, hi, Nick," Tessa said with that fake sweetness she'd perfected. "Sorry to hear about everything." "Are you?" I asked. "Because you sound pretty thrilled, Nick," Rachel warned. "No, it's okay," Tessa continued. "I just think it's healthy when people recognize they've grown apart. Some marriages just run their course." "Run their course," I repeated, like a prescription or a gym membership. "Exactly. You get it." Jaime was watching this exchange like a tennis match, his eyes getting wider with each volley. "So, when did you first notice our marriage had, quote, run its course, Tessa? Was it before or after you started covering for Rachel's lunch dates?" The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. "I think you should focus on moving forward," Tessa said, her voice tighter now. "Dwelling on the past isn't healthy." "You're right," I said, grabbing another box. "The past is so messy. All those inconvenient things like wedding vows and family commitments. Much easier to just start fresh." Rachel was giving me her warning look, the one that used to make me back down. Not today. "Jamie," I said, "why don't you help me load these boxes in the truck? We can grab pizza afterward." "Can I stay at your place tonight?" He asked if it's okay with your mum. Rachel hesitated, probably calculating how it would look if she said no. "I suppose, just for tonight." As we loaded boxes into my pickup truck, Jaime was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke up. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" I stopped, a box of my old paramedic gear in my hands. I'd been in the EMT for 8 years before I started the restoration business. Good job, steady pay. But Rachel had wanted me to aim higher. Ironic, considering where we'd ended up. "I don't know yet, buddy. We're separated right now, which means we're taking some time to figure things out. But she's dating Dr. Mendoza." It wasn't a question. Kids see everything, even when adults think they're being subtle. "Yeah," I said. "She is." "That's messed up." "Yeah," I agreed. "It really is." We finished loading in silence. As I drove away from the house I'd called home for over a decade, I caught sight of Rachel in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway with Tessa. They were already deep in conversation, probably planning the next phase of Rachel's new life. The apartment above my shop was sparse but functional. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a living area with windows overlooking the street. Jaime helped me carry boxes upstairs, making jokes about the bachelor pad aesthetic. "It's not so bad," he said, flopping on the couch I'd bought from a thrift store. Kind of like a man cave, but with more sadness. Thanks for the pep talk, kid. My phone rang. Rachel Jamie needs to be home by 9 tomorrow, she said without preamble. It's a school night. I know what day it is, Rachel. And Nick, try not to poison him against me, okay? This is hard enough. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, wondering when my wife had become someone I didn't recognize. Everything okay? Jamie asked. Sure, I lied. Just your mom being your mom. But as I unpacked my clothes into a dresser that had seen better decades, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to get a lot more complicated. Rachel and Jacob were making plans, and I was apparently just supposed to go along with them. That night, lying on a mattress that squeaked every time I moved, I stared at the ceiling and made some plans of my own. 2 months into my new life as a weekend dad and full-time bachelor, I got an unexpected invitation. Jaime's school was having their annual fundraiser, and apparently I was still on the mailing list. The theme was building bridges, which seemed either perfectly appropriate or cosmically ironic, depending on your perspective. You should go, Rye said, sliding another beer across the bar. Murphy's Tavern had become my second home, a place where the bartender knew your story and didn't judge your choices. Show the flag. Let people see you're still standing. Rachel will be there with Doctor. Perfect. I pointed out might be awkward. So, it's your kid's school too? You got as much right to be there as anyone. Rye had a point. Plus, Jamie had specifically asked me to come. Dad, please don't let Mom and Jacob be the only ones representing our family, he'd said. That would be weird. The fundraiser was at the Marriott downtown, one of those hotel ballrooms that tried too hard to look elegant. I'd rented a tux. My old one no longer fit quite right, probably from too many of Ray's burgers and not enough home-cooked meals. I arrived fashionably late, hoping to avoid the cocktail hour small talk. The ballroom was packed with Cleveland's suburban elite, all dressed up and ready to bid on vacation packages they didn't need to support programs they'd never use. I spotted Rachel immediately. She was wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, standing near the silent auction table with Jacob at her side. He was in his element, shaking hands and flashing that perfect smile, playing the part of the successful doctor with his beautiful companion. Nick. I turned to find Mrs. Patterson, Jaime's English teacher, approaching with a warm smile. I'm so glad you could make it. Jaime will be thrilled. Wouldn't miss it, I said. How's he doing in class? Wonderful student. Very insightful, especially in our discussions about character motivation. She paused, studying my face. He's handling everything very maturely. Everything right. The polite way of saying your wife's very public midlife crisis. I made my way through the crowd, nodding to parents I recognized, avoiding the ones who gave me pitying looks. The auction items were displayed on tables around the room. Spa weekends, restaurant gift certificates, sports memorabilia. I was examining a vintage Browns jersey when I felt someone approach. Nick. Rachel's voice was carefully neutral. I didn't expect to see you here. I turned. She looked good. I had to admit marriage to me might have been a disappointment, but it hadn't hurt her appearance any. Jacob stood slightly behind her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. Jamie asked me to come, I said. Something about family representation. Jacob stepped forward, extending his hand. Good to see you, Nick. How is the leg healing up? I shook his hand, resisting the urge to squeeze a little too hard. Good as new, thanks for asking. Glad to hear it. Rachel was worried about you. Was she? I looked at my wife, who was studying the auction table like it held the secrets of the universe. That's sweet, I said. I was worried about her, too. All those late meetings at the hospital. Very stressful. Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly. Jacob's smile didn't waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. Well, Rachel said quickly. "We should let you enjoy the evening." "Come on, Jacob. I want to show you the vacation packages. They moved away." Jacob's hand still on her back. I watched them go, noting how Rachel leaned into him slightly, how he whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. Tough night. I turned to find Tom Bradley, another parent I knew from school events. His son was on Jaime's soccer team. "Just getting reacquainted with my new normal," I said. Tom nodded knowingly. "Diane and I went through something similar 5 years ago. Different circumstances, but, well, these things happen." "How'd it work out?" "We got through it. Counseling helped. Communication." He paused. "Of course, we both wanted to get through it. That makes a difference." Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and a voice called for attention. The formal program was beginning, complete with speeches from the principal and the PTA president about the importance of community support. I found a seat near the back, hoping to stay invisible, but as the principal introduced the evening's special guests, prominent community members who had made significant donations, I heard a familiar name. Dr. Jacob Mendoza, who recently joined our school health advisory board and has generously donated his time and expertise. Jacob stood, waving to polite applause. Rachel beamed beside him, playing the proud girlfriend. I felt my jaw clench. The principal continued. "Dr. Mendoza will be speaking about the importance of health education in our schools." Jacob made his way to the podium, all confidence and charm. He launched into a speech about childhood obesity and the need for better nutrition programs, hitting all the right notes about community responsibility and investing in our children's future. As someone who's new to this community, he said, "I'm impressed by the dedication I see here tonight. These children are lucky to have parents who care so deeply about their education and well-being." New to the community, right? New enough that he probably didn't know most of these people had watched me coach Little League and volunteer for school fundraisers for years. New enough that he felt comfortable moving in on another man's family without a second thought. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. Call it paranoia, but something about Jacob's speech felt rehearsed, like he was auditioning for a role. "Education is about more than just academic achievement," Jacob continued. "It's about teaching our children to make good choices, to understand consequences, to take responsibility for their actions." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a scalpel. "Sometimes," he said, his voice taking on a more personal tone, "children find themselves in difficult situations because the adults in their lives haven't modeled the behavior we want to see. That's why it's so important for us to step up to provide stable, positive influences." I stopped recording and stared at the phone. Was he talking about me in front of 300 people who knew my family? The applause was enthusiastic. Jacob returned to his seat, where Rachel squeezed his hand and whispered something that made him smile. I sat there for another 20 minutes, watching the auction results roll in, listening to more speeches about community values and family support. When they announced the final fundraising total, a record amount thanks in part to Dr. Mendoza's generous contributions, I'd had enough. I was heading for the exit when I ran into Jamie in the hallway. He was with a group of kids, probably sneaking away from the adult festivities. "Dad, you came!" He seemed genuinely happy to see me. "Told you I would. How's it going?" "Boring, but Mom's happy. She and Dr. Mendoza donated like $5,000. $5,000 on a teacher's salary. That would have been a stretch for us. Apparently, dating a doctor came with financial benefits. That's generous." I managed. "Yeah, he's been buying her lots of stuff lately. Jewelry, clothes, that new purse she carries everywhere." Jaime paused. "It's kind of weird, actually." "How so?" "I don't know. It's like he's trying too hard, you know? Like he's proving something." Out of the mouths of babes. My 14-year-old son had picked up on something that apparently escaped the adults in the room. "Well," I said, "some people express themselves differently." "I guess you heading home?" "Yeah, School night, right? Right. See you this weekend. Absolutely. We'll work on the Mustang some more. Jaime's face lit up. The car restoration had become our project, something that belonged just to us. Rachel had always complained about the time and money I spent on it, but Jaime loved getting his hands dirty, learning how engines worked, seeing something broken become beautiful again. I was almost to my truck when I heard footsteps behind me. "Nick, wait up!" I turned. Jacob was jogging across the parking lot, his tux jacket flapping behind him. "What can I do for you, Doc?" He stopped a few feet away, slightly out of breath. Up close, he was younger than I'd thought, maybe 35, with a kind of smooth confidence that came from never having been truly challenged. "Look," he said, "I know this is awkward. The whole situation. But I want you to know I respect what you and Rachel had. I'm not trying to replace you or anything, just trying to upgrade her, right?" His smile faltered slightly. "That's not. Look, Rachel's a remarkable woman. She deserves to be happy, and she wasn't happy with me." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. Your speech in there was pretty clear about adults who don't model good behavior." Jacob had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That wasn't about you specifically." "Sure it wasn't." I stepped closer, close enough to see the uncertainty creep into his eyes. "Let me ask you something, Doc. When did you first realize Rachel was unhappy? Was it before or after you started having lunch meetings?" "Nick, I think you're misunderstanding." "Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you saw an opportunity and took it. Married woman, stable family, teenage kid who needed his parents together. But hey, why let that stop you when there's an upgrade available?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Tell me, how long have you been planning the move to Columbus? Because Rachel seems pretty excited about it." The surprise on his face was answer enough. He hadn't expected me to know about that. "Look," he said, his voice dropping, "what happens between Rachel and me is between us. You need to focus on moving on." "Moving on," I repeated. "Right, just pack up 15 years and pretend it never happened. Very convenient for you. It's convenient for everyone. Rachel's happy, I'm happy, and eventually you'll be happy too. Jamie will adjust. Jamie will adjust." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You know what, Doc? You're right about one thing. Jamie will adjust. Kids are resilient that way. But here's what you might not understand about kids. They remember everything. Every broken promise, every time an adult let them down, every moment when they realized the people they trusted were just looking out for themselves." Jacob's confidence was starting to crack around the edges. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you better hope you're in this for the long haul. Because if you're just playing house with my family until something better comes along, Jaime's going to remember that. And so will I." I walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing in the parking lot in his expensive tux, probably wondering if that had been a threat. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. As I drove home through the empty streets, I thought about Jacob's speech, about modeling good behavior and taking responsibility for your actions. He was right about one thing. Children did learn from the adults around them. Jaime was about to get an education in what happened when someone messed with his family. And Dr. Jacob Mendoza was about to learn that not everyone was as easy to replace as he thought. The envelope was sitting on my windshield when I came out of Murphy's Tavern Thursday night, tucked under the wiper blade like a parking ticket. But parking tickets don't usually come in cream-colored envelopes with law firm letterhead. I opened it right there under the streetlight, Ray watching from the doorway of his bar. "Petition for dissolution of marriage and custody modification," I read aloud. "Well, that's a hell of a way to end the evening." Ray walked over, squinting at the papers. "What's it say?" "The usual. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets," and I flipped to the second page. Full physical custody of the minor child with supervised visitation for the non-custodial parent. Supervised visitation? What the hell does that mean? It means Rachel thinks I'm unfit to be alone with my own son. I folded the papers and shoved them in my jacket pocket. Apparently, my recent erratic behavior and emotional instability make me a risk. That's Nick. You're the most stable guy I know. Tell that to her lawyer. 1. Martin Kessler, attorney at law. I had heard of Kessler. He advertised on late-night TV, promising to fight for your rights in personal injury and divorce cases. Real bottom-feeder stuff. You need a lawyer, Ray said. I need a drink first, then a lawyer. We went back inside where Ray poured me a double whiskey and slid it across the bar. The tavern was nearly empty. Just me, Rye, and an old guy named Pete, who'd been nursing the same beer for 2 hours. When's the court date? Rye asked. I pulled out the papers again. 3 weeks preliminary hearing to determine temporary custody arrangements. I took a long sip of whiskey. She's moving fast. Any idea what brought this on? I thought about my conversation with Jacob in the parking lot, about the look on his face when I mentioned Columbus. I think I might have rattled someone's cage at the fundraiser. My phone buzzed. A text from Jamie. Dad, can you call me? Something's wrong. I stepped outside to call him back. He answered on the first ring. Dad, thank God. I think Mom's lost her mind. What happened? She just told me about the custody thing, said you might not be able to have me on weekends anymore because you're going through some things. What the hell does that mean? I closed my eyes. Rachel was already working on Jaime, trying to prepare him for the idea that his father was somehow dangerous. It means your mom's lawyer thinks he can convince a judge I'm not stable enough to take care of you. That's insane. You're the most stable person in this whole mess. I appreciate the vote of confidence, kiddo. Where are you now? In my room. Mom and Jacob are downstairs planning something. I heard them talking about Columbus again. What did you hear exactly? Jacob got some job offer there. Department head at the university hospital. Big promotion, lots of money. They want to move this summer. This summer. That was 4 months away. Rachel wasn't just planning to limit my time with Jaime, she was planning to take him 3 hours away. Jaime, I need you to listen to me carefully. Don't let on that you told me about Columbus, okay? And if they ask you about wanting to live with me, just tell them you want what's best for everyone. But I do want to live with you. I know. But right now we need to be smart about this. Can you do that for me? Yeah, Dad. Are you going to fight this? I looked through the window of Murphy's Tavern where Ray was wiping down glasses and pretending not to eavesdrop. Pete had finally finished his beer and was counting out exact change for his tab. Normal people living normal lives, not dealing with custody battles and cheating spouses. Yeah, I told my son. I'm going to fight this. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the offices of Patricia Wells, attorney at law. I'd found her online, family law specialist with good reviews in a downtown office that didn't advertise on TV. Patricia Wells was about 50, with gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. Her office was professional but warm, with family photos on her desk and diplomas on the wall. Mr. Harmon, she said, reviewing the papers I brought, this is quite aggressive for an initial filing. Supervised visitation is usually reserved for cases involving abuse or substance problems. Well, I've never hit anyone, and my biggest vice is beer with dinner. Any mental health issues, depression, anxiety, anything that might have come up during the separation. I thought about the nights I'd spent staring at the ceiling, wondering where my marriage had gone wrong. I've been sad, angry, but not crazy. Any incidents with your wife or her boyfriend? Arguments, confrontations. We had words at a school fundraiser. Nothing physical. She made notes on a legal pad. Tell me about your relationship with your son. That was easier. I told her about our weekend projects, about Jaime's grades and his friends, about how he'd been handling the separation. She nodded, making more notes. Mr. Harmon, I'm going to be direct with you. Your wife's attorney is painting a picture of an unstable man who can't handle the end of his marriage. The supervised visitation request suggests they have something they plan to present to the court. Like what could be anything? Witnesses who will testify about your behavior? Evidence of drinking? Financial irresponsibility? They might even claim you've made threats. I thought about my conversation with Jacob. Had he interpreted that as a threat? Would he testify that I had intimidated him? What do I need to do? First, we document everything. Your relationship with Jaime, your financial stability, your mental health. Second, we look into their situation. If they're planning to move out of state, that changes things significantly. They are Columbus. Jacob got a job offer. Her eyebrows went up. They told you this? Jaime overheard them talking. That's helpful. Courts don't like it when one parent tries to relocate a child without considering the impact on the other parent's relationship. She leaned back in her chair. Mr. Harmon, I have to ask, is there anything in your past that could be used against you? Anything at all? I thought about it. A few speeding tickets, one bar fight in college that never went to court. The usual mistakes of a man who'd lived 40 years. Nothing major. I'm not perfect, but I'm not dangerous. Good. Now, I need you to start keeping a detailed record of your interactions with Jaime. Times, dates, activities, his emotional state. Also, any communication with your wife or doctor. Mendoza, save texts, emails, voicemails, everything. What about private investigators? I see that in movies. She smiled. This isn't the movies, Mr. Harmon. But if you suspect your wife is hiding assets, or if there are questions about Dr. Mendoza's background, it might be worth considering. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a list of things to do. Document everything. Gather financial records. Find character witnesses. The legal equivalent of building a fortress around my relationship with my son. That afternoon, I was working on the Mustang when my phone rang. Rachel, Nick, we need to talk. About what? About Jaime? About the custody arrangement? I think we can work something out without involving lawyers. I set down my wrench and walked away from the car. You mean without involving my lawyer? Yours seems pretty involved already. Martin was just being thorough. I told him I wanted to protect Jaime's interests by claiming I need supervised visits. What exactly do you think I'm going to do to our son, Rachel? Silence. Then you've been different since the accident. Angry. Jaime's noticed. I've been different since I found out my wife was cheating on me. Most people would be angry about that. I wasn't cheating. We were separated. We were separated after I found out about Jacob. Don't rewrite history. Another pause. Look, I don't want this to get ugly. If you'll agree to reasonable visitation, say every other weekend, we can modify the petition. And when you moved to Columbus... The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. How did you know about that? Does it matter? Were you planning to tell me or just disappear one day with my son? It's not final. Jacob's considering the offer. You've already made up your minds. The only question is whether you were going to let me know before or after you packed. Nick, please, let's meet somewhere and talk about this like adults. Adults? I repeated. Right. Where did you want to meet? Romanos? I hear they have great lunch specials. The line went dead. I stood there in my garage, surrounded by tools and car parts and the remnants of the life I'd built, and realized that Patricia Wells was right. This was going to be a war, and Rachel had already chosen her weapons. Time to choose mine. Ray's ex-girlfriend, Linda, worked in medical records at Cleveland General. Not exactly a private investigator, but she had access to hospital gossip and a grudge against doctors who thought they were God's gift to women. Perfect for my purposes. Jacob Mendoza, she said, stirring her coffee. We were meeting at a diner near the hospital, far enough from Murphy's that we wouldn't be seen together. Yeah, I know him. Arrogant prick thinks every nurse wants to sleep with him. Does every nurse want to sleep with him? Linda snorted. Some of the younger ones get all fluttery when he walks by, but the smart ones know his reputation, which is serial dater goes through girlfriends like surgical gloves. Usually married women. Usually someone else's problem when it blows up. She leaned across the table. Word is, he's got at least 3 other situations like yours going on right now. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. 3? Well, 1 ended when the husband found out and threatened to report him to the medical board. Another one cooled off when the woman realized he was just using her for sex. But there's still at least 1 other married lady he's been seeing. Anyone I might know? Doubt it. She works in pediatrics, married to some accountant, 2 kids. Linda shook her head. Guy's got a type. Successful women who are bored with their husbands. What about the move to Columbus? Oh, that's real. He's been bragging about it for weeks. Department head position, big salary bump, chance to build his own program. She paused. He's also been telling people he's bringing his fiancée with him. Fiancée? That's what he calls Rachel. Don't know if it's official or just wishful thinking. I drove back to my shop with Linda's information rattling around in my head. Jacob wasn't just stealing my wife. He was collecting married women like trophies. And Rachel thought she was special. That evening, Jaime called with more intelligence. Dad, I found something weird. What kind of weird? Mom's been getting packages, like expensive stuff, jewelry boxes, designer bags, flowers, but she hides them when I'm around. Where does she hide them? Her closet mostly, but today I saw her putting something in the garage. In that old filing cabinet where she keeps tax stuff. Interesting. Rachel was either hiding gifts from Jacob or hiding evidence of their relationship. Either way, it suggested she knew what she was doing was wrong. Jaime, I need you to be careful. Don't go looking through your mom's stuff, okay? If she catches you, it'll make things worse. I know, but Dad, I think she's scared about something. She keeps checking her phone and looking nervous. Maybe Linda's information about Jacob's other women had reached Rachel. Or maybe she was starting to realize that moving to Columbus meant burning bridges she might need later. The next morning, I got a call from Patricia Wells. Mr. Harmon, I've been doing some research on Dr. Mendoza. There's nothing criminal, but there are some interesting patterns, such as he's been named in 3 different divorce proceedings over the past 5 years, always as the other man, never as a defendant, but his name keeps coming up. Is that unusual for most people? Yes, for someone who specifically targets married women, not so much. I heard papers rustling. There's also a complaint filed with the hospital's ethics board 2 years ago. A nurse claimed he was harassing her, making unwanted advances. It was dismissed, but it's on record. What does that mean for our case? It means, Doctor, Mendoza has a pattern of inappropriate relationships. If we can establish that he pursued your wife while you were still married, it undermines their claim that you're the unstable one. How do we prove that? We need evidence. Emails, texts, witnesses who can testify about when the relationship started. She paused. Mr. Harmon, I have to ask, do you have access to any of your wife's electronic communications? We shared a cell phone plan until last month. I might still have access to the account records. That could be helpful. Phone records, text logs, anything that shows a pattern of communication before your separation. I spent that afternoon at the Verizon store, sweet-talking a customer service rep into printing out 6 months of phone records. Rachel had been texting Jacob dozens of times a day, starting 3 months before my accident. The pattern was clear. Short messages during work hours, longer conversations in the evenings, late-night calls that lasted for hours. I spread the records across my kitchen table, highlighting the relevant entries. The timeline told a story: casual contact in January, increasing frequency in February, daily communication by March. By the time I'd wrapped my Honda around that guardrail, they'd been talking more to each other than Rachel and I had. My phone rang. Rachel again. "Nick, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday. Maybe we can work something out." "I'm listening." "What if we agreed to joint custody? 50-50 time, no supervised visits. You could even have Jaime during the school year if that's what you want." It was a complete reversal from the legal papers she'd served me. Something had changed. "What's the catch?" "No catch. I just want what's best for Jaime. And Jacob's okay with this, because last week he seemed pretty invested in being Jaime's new father figure." Another long pause. "Jacob and I have been talking. We think it's important for Jaime to maintain a strong relationship with you." Something had spooked them, and they were trying to back away from the custody fight. "When do you want to move to Columbus?" "We haven't decided anything definite." "Rachel, I've got phone records showing you and Jacob have been planning this move for months. Don't lie to me." "You've been investigating me." "I've been protecting my son. There's a difference." "Nick, please. Can't we just agree on something reasonable?" "For Jaime's sake." For Jaime's sake. The universal excuse for every bad parental decision. "Here's what's reasonable," I said. "Jaime stays in Cleveland. If you want to move to Columbus with Jacob, that's your choice. But you don't get to take my son away from his school, his friends, and his father just because your boyfriend got a promotion. That's not fair." "Fair?" I felt my temper rising. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been having this conversation before you started screwing around with Jacob. Fair would have been considering Jamie's feelings before you decided to blow up his family. Fair would have been not serving me with papers claiming I'm an unfit father." "I never said you were unfit. Your lawyer did on your behalf with your signature." The line went quiet. "Then I'll call you back." She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone records spread across my table. Each highlighted entry was a small betrayal, a moment when Rachel had chosen Jacob over her family. But now they were scared. Something had changed their calculation, made them realize that a custody fight might not go their way. I called Patricia Wells and filled her in on Rachel's sudden change of heart. "It sounds like they've realized their position isn't as strong as they thought," she said. "Or something has come to light that makes Dr. Mendoza nervous about public scrutiny." What kind of something? Could be anything. Another relationship gone wrong, problems at work, financial issues. Men like him usually have secrets they'd rather keep buried. That evening, I was working late in the shop when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I saw Jacob's Porsche gleaming under the streetlight. He sat behind the wheel for a few minutes before getting out and walking to my door. I opened it before he could knock. "Dr. Mendoza, what brings you to my humble establishment?" He looked nervous, not at all like the confident man who'd given speeches about community responsibility. "We need to talk. About what?" "About this custody situation. About what's best for everyone involved." I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the shop, taking in the tools and equipment, the Mustang under its tarp, the controlled chaos of a working man's space. "Nice setup," he said. "Thanks. I restore classic cars, mostly American muscle, some European stuff. It's honest work." He caught the emphasis on honest and shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Nick, I want you to know that I never intended for things to get this complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Rachel's a remarkable woman. I'm sure you know that. But sometimes people grow apart." "And cut the Jacob. You didn't grow apart from Rachel. You actively pursued a married woman, convinced her to leave her family, and now you want to take her son 3 hours away from his father? Don't dress it up as some kind of romantic destiny." His jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want my son to stay in Cleveland. I want reasonable custody arrangements, and I want you to stop pretending you're doing this for anyone's benefit but your own. And if I can make that happen, if Rachel agrees to let Jamie stay here with you, then you and Rachel can ride off into the sunset together. I won't stand in your way." He studied my face, probably trying to figure out if I was telling the truth. "There's something else." He said, "Rachel doesn't know I'm here." I figured she's having second thoughts about Columbus, about leaving Jaime. Good, she should. But if this custody thing goes to court, if there's a lot of publicity, he trailed off. If there's publicity, people might start asking questions about your relationship, about when it started, how it developed, whether you have a pattern of this kind of behavior. His face went pale. "I don't know what you've heard, but I've heard enough. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Jacob stood there for a long moment, probably weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "I'll talk to Rachel about the custody arrangement, about letting Jaime stay with you." "Good choice, Doc." He walked toward the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I am sorry about how this happened." "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." After he left, I sat in my shop, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, and realized that I'd just won the first real victory in this whole mess. Jacob was scared. Rachel was having second thoughts, and Jaime was going to stay home where he belonged. Sometimes the truth really does set you free. The call came at 6 o'clock in the morning, 3 days before our scheduled court date. Patricia Wells sounded wide awake, which was more than I could say for myself. "Mr. Harmon, I just received a very interesting phone call from Martin Kessler." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. Rachel's lawyer? Former lawyer? He's withdrawing from the case. Apparently, his client has decided to pursue a different approach. What kind of different approach? The kind where she agrees to joint custody and drops all claims about supervised visitation. Mr. Kessler seemed quite relieved to be off the case. I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. What changed? That's what I'd like to know. In my experience, people don't abandon aggressive legal strategies unless something significant has shifted. She paused. "Have you had any recent contact with Dr. Mendoza or your wife?" Jacob stopped by my shop a few nights ago. We had a conversation about what would be best for everyone involved. "What kind of conversation?" I told her about Jacob's visit, his nervousness, his promise to talk to Rachel about the custody arrangement. "Interesting," Patricia said. "It sounds like doctor." Mendoza realized that a public custody battle might not be in his best interests because of his history with married women. That's part of it, but I did some more digging after our last conversation. Dr. Mendoza has been having some problems at the hospital. What kind of problems? The kind that happen when someone files a formal complaint with the medical board. Apparently, one of his former girlfriends, a nurse at Cleveland General, has accused him of using his position to pressure her into a relationship. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. When did this happen? The complaint was filed last week, right around the time you and Dr. Mendoza had your conversation at the school fundraiser. The timing was perfect. Jacob had been riding high, playing the successful doctor with his beautiful girlfriend, making speeches about community responsibility. Then his past had caught up with him, and suddenly a public custody battle didn't seem like such a good idea. What happens now? Now we negotiate the terms of your custody agreement. Since Mrs. Harmon no longer has legal representation, I'd suggest we move quickly to formalize the arrangement. And if she changes her mind? She won't. Not if Dr. Mendoza wants to keep his medical license. I hung up the phone and lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling. After months of feeling like I was losing everything, my wife, my son, my sense of who I was, things were finally starting to turn around. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "Mom wants to talk to you. She seems really upset about something." I texted back, "I'll call her in a few minutes." But first, I wanted to savor this moment. Jacob Mendoza, the man who'd stolen my wife and tried to take my son, was about to learn that actions have consequences. I called Rachel at 8 after I'd had coffee and a shower and felt ready to deal with whatever emotional manipulation she might try. "Nick," she said, her voice strained. "We need to meet today." About what? About Jamie? About the custody arrangement? About... She paused. "About everything." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me for lunch, somewhere neutral?" "Where?" "That diner on Prospect, near your shop." Neutral territory. Smart choice. Public enough that we couldn't have a screaming match. Familiar enough that I'd be comfortable. "What time?" "Noon. I'll be there." The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. Just a few construction workers grabbing coffee and an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie. Rachel was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past month. She'd always been beautiful. My wife, even now, stressed and tired. She had that quality that made people look twice, but there was something different about her, something fragile that hadn't been there before. "Thanks for coming," she said, as I slid into the booth across from her. "You said it was about Jamie." "It is, partly." She fidgeted with her coffee cup, not meeting my eyes. "Nick, I want to apologize. I waited for the custody petition for the supervised visitation thing." Martin said it was necessary, but I knew it was wrong. Martin said a lot of things, but you signed the papers. "I know. I was scared, and I wasn't thinking clearly." "Scared of what?" She looked up then, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Genuine fear. "Of losing everything. Of you taking Jaime away from me. Of ending up with nothing." "Rachel, I never wanted to take Jaime away from you. I just wanted to be his father. I know that now." But at the time, she shook her head. "Jacob said you might try to get full custody. He said men were doing that more often, using the courts to punish their ex-wives." "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe him. It made it easier to justify what I was doing." The waitress came over and I ordered coffee and a sandwich. Rachel asked for more coffee but no food. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "So, what's changed?" I asked when we were alone again. "Everything," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "God, Nick, what a mess I've made. Want to talk about it?" She was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the traffic on Prospect Avenue. Finally, she spoke. "Jacob's not who I thought he was." "How so?" "He's been seeing other women the whole time we've been together. I found out last week." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and pity. Satisfaction that Jacob's true nature had finally revealed itself. Pity that Rachel had to learn it the hard way. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Are you really, Rachel? Whatever happened between us, I never wanted you to get hurt." She started crying then, quietly, tears running down her cheeks while she tried to maintain her composure. "I threw away 15 years of marriage for a man who is using me. How stupid is that?" "Pretty stupid," I agreed. "But not unforgivable, isn't it? I cheated on you, lied to you, tried to take your son away. I don't know how you can even look at me." The waitress brought my coffee and sandwich. I took a sip, thinking about Rachel's question. "I can look at you because you're Jamie's mother," I said finally. "And because, despite everything, I don't hate you. You should, maybe. But hate takes too much energy, and I've got better things to do with my time." She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out how to be divorced parents who don't destroy each other or our son." "And the Columbus thing?" "What about it?" Jacob still wants to move. He says the job offer is too good to pass up. So go with him. She looks surprised. You'd be okay with that? Rachel, you're a grown woman. You can live wherever you want, but Jamie stays here. I know. I wouldn't take him away from you. Good. We sat in silence for a while, picking at our food and avoiding eye contact. Finally, Rachel spoke again. There's something else you should know about Jacob. What? He's in trouble at work. Some kind of investigation. He might lose his license. I thought about Patricia Wells's information about the medical board complaint. What kind of trouble? I don't know all the details. Something about inappropriate relationships with staff members. She looked at me directly. I think I might have to testify. About what? About how our relationship started. About whether he pursued me while I was still married. The irony was perfect. Jacob's pattern of predatory behavior was finally catching up with him, and Rachel was going to be the one to confirm it. Will you tell the truth? Yes, whatever that costs me. It might cost you, Jacob. I think I've already lost him. The question is whether I've lost you and Jaime too. I finished my sandwich and signaled for the check. You haven't lost Jaime. He's your son and he loves you. You'll have to work to rebuild that relationship, but it's not impossible. And you? I thought about that. Rachel had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, had tried to destroy my relationship with my son, had chosen another man over her family. By any reasonable measure, I should hate her. But sitting across from her in that diner, seeing her broken and scared, and finally understanding what she'd thrown away, I realized that hate wasn't what I felt. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'm willing to find out. The check came to $12.37. I left $15 on the table and stood up. Rachel, for what it's worth, I hope things work out for you, whatever that looks like. Thank you, she whispered. I walked out of the diner into the bright afternoon sunlight, feeling like I was emerging from a long, dark tunnel. My marriage was over. Probably had been for months before I'd admitted it to myself. But my relationship with Jaime was secure. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could see a clear path forward. That evening, Jamie came over for dinner. We worked on the Mustang afterward, adjusting the carburetor and checking the timing. The car was almost ready for its first real test drive. Dad, Jamie said, his head under the hood. Mom told me she's not moving to Columbus. How do you feel about that? Relieved, I guess, but also kind of sad for her. Why sad? Because she gave up everything for a guy who turned out to be a jerk. That's gotta hurt. My son, the philosopher. At 14, he already understood something that had taken me months to figure out. Sometimes, the people who hurt us are hurting too. Yeah, I said. It probably does hurt. Are you going to get back together? I don't think so, kiddo. Too much has happened. But you don't hate her anymore. It wasn't a question. Jaime had always been perceptive, even as a little kid. No, I said. I don't hate her anymore. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, father and son, rebuilding something that had been broken. Outside, the sun was setting over Cleveland, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow, Patricia Wells would finalize the custody agreement. Rachel would start the process of rebuilding her life without Jacob, and I would continue the slow work of figuring out who I was as a single father. But tonight, in my garage with my son, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the promise of a classic car ready to roar back to life, everything felt exactly as it should be. Hand me that wrench, Jamie. Which one? The big one. We've got work to do. 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 We've got work to do.